5 years ago, the most powerful man on the East Coast looked her in the eyes and told her she was nothing, that she meant nothing, that if he ever saw her face again, she would regret it. She believed him. She ran. She built a life from the wreckage of the one he destroyed, a new name, a quiet town, two children who had never heard their father's name spoken out loud. But fate doesn't negotiate, and monsters don't stay buried. Because today, on a rain-soaked street in a town that was supposed to be her sanctuary, Damian Blackwood is standing 10 feet away, and he is staring at her son's face like he's looking in a mirror. If you've ever loved someone who nearly destroyed you, stay until the end. Like this video, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning of the day everything fell apart. Started the way most mornings did in Harrow's Cove, Maine. Gray and cold and honest about it. The Atlantic pushed hard against the rocks below the cliffs, the kind of push that had no interest in being poetic. It was just water doing what water did, indifferent to the women who stood at kitchen windows watching it and thinking about things they weren't supposed to think about anymore. Savannah Whitmore, or Claire Mercer, as the people of Harrow's Cove knew her, was already behind schedule by 6:45 in the morning, and she hadn't even gotten the twins into their shoes yet. Ethan! She didn't look up from the coffee she was pouring into a travel thermos, because if she looked up, she would lose her patience entirely. Shoes, now! I can't find the left one. It's where you left it. I left it somewhere I can't find it. She exhaled through her nose. 5 years of solo parenting had taught her that there were exactly 3 states a 5-year-old could occupy before 7 in the morning: chaotic, destructive, or asleep. Ethan was oscillating between the first two. Lily, his twin, was already sitting at the front door with both shoes on and her backpack buckled, watching her brother with the particular contempt that only a 5-year-old girl can level at a 5-year-old boy she shares a womb history with. "It's under the couch," Lily said. "It's been under the couch since Tuesday." Ethan looked at her. "How do you know that?" "Because I watched you kick it there and didn't say anything." Savannah closed her eyes for 2 seconds. Just 2. Then she set the thermos down, crossed the small living room of their rented cottage, knelt beside the couch, and extracted one small sneaker from beneath it. She handed it to her son without a word, which was a discipline she had spent the better part of 4 years developing. Ethan took it like it was a perfectly normal exchange. "Thanks, Mom." She got them out the door by 7:10, which was not great but was not catastrophic. The cafe opened at 8. Her employee, a retired lobsterman's wife named Dottie, who was worth more than her hourly wage suggested, would already be there unlocking and starting the espresso machine and arranging the pastries that the bakery 2 blocks over delivered every morning at 7:30. Savannah had designed the whole operation to function in the 30 or 40 minutes between the twins' school drop-off and her own arrival, because that was the kind of life she had built, one with buffers, contingencies, escape valves. She had learned, in the hardest possible way, that a life without those things was just a life waiting to collapse. The school was 6 blocks from the cottage. She walked them every morning and had since they'd moved to Harrow's Cove when the twins were barely 9 months old. She'd been driving when they were infants, an old Jeep she'd bought for cash in Portsmouth. But the car had died the previous winter and she hadn't replaced it yet because the repairs on the cafe roof had eaten the savings she'd set aside for it. And she kept telling herself she'd figure it out, that it was fine, that 6 blocks was nothing. 6 blocks was nothing except when it was raining. It was raining, not hard. Not the furious kind of rain that Maine did sometimes in late October. The kind that came sideways and tried to get inside your collar. But steady, purposeful rain, the kind that soaked through everything slowly. She'd gotten them both into their yellow slicker jackets, the ones that made them look like tiny highway workers, and she was walking fast with her own jacket held closed against her chest because she'd never gotten around to replacing the zipper. And she was thinking about the cafe and the delivery order she needed to place before noon, and whether Dottie had remembered to order more of the salon blend because last week 2 tables had asked for it, and she'd had to apologize. Ethan stopped walking. She almost walked into him. "What? Mom." He was looking at something across the street. His voice had gone strange, the way children's voices went when they were trying to process something adult, when they bumped up against a feeling they didn't have language for yet. "Mom, that man is looking at us." She should have kept walking. She should have put her hand on his shoulder and said something about not staring at strangers and guided them both forward and thought nothing of it. Instead, something happened in her chest. Some old, ugly instinct that she had buried under 5 years of routines and early mornings and the smell of ground coffee and the sound of the ocean, it fired. She looked up. Damian Blackwood was standing across the street. The world didn't slow down. That was something that happened in stories, the cinematic courtesy of everything pausing so you could absorb the disaster. In reality, the rain kept falling at exactly the same pace. A truck rumbled past on the coast road, and somewhere behind her Lily said something she didn't hear, and her own heart just kept beating, but wrong somehow, in the wrong sequence, like it had skipped a measure and was trying to catch up. He was in a dark coat, no umbrella. His hair was wet from the rain, though he didn't appear to have registered this because he was not looking at the sky or at the street or at anything except her. Except them. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe she'd spent 5 years unconsciously shrinking him down to something manageable in her memory. He was broader across the shoulders. There was a hardness in his face that hadn't been there before, or maybe it had, and she'd been too young and too stupid and too desperately in love to see it. But his eyes were the same. Dark as creek water. The kind of eyes that held things in them and never let them go. He was looking at Ethan. She felt the moment he saw it. She watched it happen. Watched the precise second that recognition moved through him, that his gaze traveled from her son's face to her own and back again, and landed on something that made every controlled, calculating thing about him go absolutely still. "Mom," Ethan again tugging her sleeve. "Do you know him?" She put her hand on her son's shoulder. Her voice came out steady, because she needed it to, because she had spent 5 years building the kind of woman who could keep her voice steady. "Let's cross at the next block. Come on." She didn't run. Running was panic, and panic was a signal, and she was not going to signal anything to anyone on a public street in the town where she lived. She turned her children and she walked them north toward the next intersection, and she felt him watching her the entire time, and she did not look back. She dropped the twins at school. She smiled at their teacher. She answered the question their teacher asked about the fall fundraiser with a complete sentence. She waited until she had turned the corner off the school's front path before she pressed her back against the exterior wall of the hardware store next door and let herself breathe. Actually breathe, ragged and uneven, for 30 seconds. Then she pulled her phone out and called Dottie. "I'm going to be late," she said. "How late?" Dottie's voice was the voice of a woman who had weathered worse things than a delayed boss. "I don't know." She was already walking. Away from the cafe, away from the school, running the geography of the town through her head with the desperate mechanical focus of someone doing math to avoid thinking about what the math means. "Can you handle the morning rush?" "Claire, honey, I run the morning rush every day." "I know, I'm sorry. I need an hour." "Take 2. The pastries are here and the salon came in yesterday. You're covered." She hung up and walked to the cliffside park on the north end of Harrow's Cove, the one where she sometimes took the twins on Sunday mornings when the weather was decent. She sat on a wet bench and looked at the ocean and tried to think. Damian Blackwood was in Harrow's Cove, Maine. The thought sat in her brain like something with weight to it, something that kept sinking no matter how many times she tried to push it back up. There were approximately 12,000 people in Harrow's Cove. It was not by any measurement a place that Damian Blackwood should have any reason to be. It was 300 miles from New York. It had 1 bar, 2 diners, a hardware store, her cafe, and a lobster processing facility that employed a third of the working population. It was specifically the kind of place that men like Damian Blackwood did not exist. She had chosen it for exactly that reason. She had done everything right. She had chosen a town that was nothing, with nothing in it that would attract nothing and nobody that came from her old life. She had a name that wasn't her name, a history that she had constructed from the ground up, a social security number that a desperate woman in a Portsmouth motel had sold her for $800 cash, a piece of the severance she'd taken from her old firm. She had told no one where she was going, not her former colleagues, not her friends, the few she'd had, not her parents, who were dead, not her sister, Vanessa. The name arrived in her thoughts the way it always did, with the image attached, the one that lived in the back of her skull like a splinter she'd never been able to work out. The Manhattan penthouse, the skyline at midnight, the way she'd walked in on them, and the whole world had rearranged itself into something she didn't recognize. She pressed her palms flat against the wet bench slats and held herself there. That was the past. She had put the past in a box, and the box in a room, and the room behind a door, and she had been the only one with the key. For 5 years, she had been the only one with the key. And then Ethan had looked up at a man on a rain-soaked street, and the whole architecture of her careful buried life had cracked through. She was still sitting there 20 minutes later when she heard footsteps on the gravel path behind her. She didn't turn around. She heard him stop a few feet away. She heard him breathe. She waited because she was done running, at least for the next 60 seconds, at least until she had to. "You changed your hair," Damien said. It was shorter now, darker. She'd dyed it twice in the first year after she left, eventually settling on a plain brown that matched no photograph anyone had of her. "I did a lot of things," she said. She heard him come closer. She didn't look. He came around the side of the bench and sat on the other end of it, which was not what she'd expected, though she didn't know what she'd expected. She looked at him from the corner of her eye. He was looking at the ocean. His coat was soaked through at the shoulders. "Maine," he said. "Maine," she agreed. "Of all the places." He said it without inflection, which was somehow worse than if he'd said it with anger. "It's a quiet town. It's a very quiet town." He paused. "How long?" "Almost 5 years." He was quiet for a moment. She watched a fishing boat moving along the far edge of the horizon, slow and patient. The rain had lightened to mist. "The children," he said. She had known this was coming. She had been preparing for it, in the abstract, for 5 years. The conversation that would happen if she were ever found. She had run through versions of it in her head, late at night, when the twins were asleep and the cafe was closed, and the house was quiet enough that her own thoughts got too loud. She had prepared defenses, arguments, explanations. She had assembled the words and arranged them in order. All of them evaporated. "Their names are Ethan and Lily," she said. She heard him exhale, something unsteady in it, carefully contained. "How old?" 5 in August. Another silence, longer. The ocean filled it. "Savannah." She turned to look at him then, because he'd said her real name, the name no one in Harrow's Cove knew, the name she hadn't heard from another person in almost 5 years. And it hit her like a hand pressed flat against her sternum. His face was close. Too close. And the look on it was the one she had spent 5 years trying to stop seeing when she closed her eyes. Not the fury, not the cold, controlled dismissal, not the voice that had told her to disappear and meant it, but the underneath of all that, the thing that lived below the armor. "Are they mine?" he asked. The question was so quiet it was almost nothing, but it landed so hard she felt her hands go cold. She looked at him for a long moment. At the eyes that were, unmistakably and without any possible dispute, the same eyes that had looked up at him from the sidewalk 20 minutes ago from the face of her 5-year-old son. "Yes," she said. Damien Blackwood said nothing. He looked at her for a long time. Something moved through his face. Something she didn't have a clean name for because it was too many things happening at once, and not all of them were things she was equipped to process with him sitting 3 feet away on a wet bench in the town she'd built her hiding place. Then he looked back at the ocean. "I'm not leaving Maine," he said. "Damien, I'm not leaving Maine." The same 4 words, the same quiet, but the absolute in them had shifted from a statement into something structural, something load-bearing. "You can fight me on it. You can call a lawyer. You can call the police. You can do whatever you think you need to do. But I looked at that boy's face 20 minutes ago, and I'm not walking away from this." She stood up. She needed to be standing. "You don't get to show up in my life after 5 years and tell me what you're doing." "You're right." He didn't move. "I don't get to do most of what I've apparently been doing, but I'm here, and they're here, and I'm not leaving." He looked up at her finally, and his voice had gone rough at the edges in a way she didn't recognize. "I just want to see them. They don't know who you are." "I know. They don't know anything about you, about where I came from, about what—" She stopped, pressed her mouth closed. "They're 5 years old, Damien. They're children. They live a normal life here. They go to school, and they help me in the cafe on Saturday mornings, and they have friends, and they are completely, perfectly safe and normal, and I will not—" I know, he said again. His voice was still quiet, but it was the quiet of someone holding something very large at arm's length. I know what I am. I know what I come from. I'm not here to destroy what you built. Then what are you here to do? He didn't answer immediately. He looked at his own hands for a moment. Large hands, one of them bearing a pale scar along the outer edge that hadn't been there 5 years ago. And when he looked up, something in him had shifted. Not softened. That wasn't the right word. Cracked might have been closer to it. I drove up from Portland this morning, he said. I came to look at a property, a shipping acquisition. It was a 6-hour detour off a business trip, and I almost didn't take it. And I don't know what made me take it, except that sometimes you go somewhere for no reason that makes sense, and the universe, or whatever you believe in, puts you exactly where you were always going to end up anyway. He paused. I wasn't looking for you. I had convinced myself I was done looking for you. And now? And now my son looked up at me from a sidewalk and had my eyes. She sat back down. She didn't know when she decided to. Her legs just made the decision without her. They sat in silence for a while. The mist had thickened again into something close to actual rain. She hadn't brought an umbrella. Neither had he. Neither of them moved. I run a cafe, she said finally. It's called Mercer's. I open at 8 and I close at 4 because that's when they get out of school. On Fridays, I let Dottie close up early, and I take the kids down to the beach, even when it's cold, because they like to look for sea glass. And Lily is convinced she's going to find enough to build a lamp. Ethan is obsessed with boats. He wants to learn to sail before he turns 6. She stopped. That's their life. That's what I made for them. Damien listened to all of it without speaking. His jaw was working slightly. It's a good life, he said. It is. Better than, He stopped himself. She watched him stop himself, watched whatever he'd been about to say get caught behind his teeth. Better than the alternative, she finished for him. And she didn't say it with cruelty, just with the flat weight of truth. Yes. He nodded once. I need to get to the cafe, she said. My employee is covering for me, and she shouldn't have to do the whole morning alone. Okay. This isn't finished. No, he agreed. It isn't. She stood up and straightened her jacket and turned toward the path. She made it 4 steps before she stopped, because there was something else. Something that had been sitting in her chest since the moment she saw him on the sidewalk, coiled there alongside the fear and the old ruinous want, and she needed to say it before she lost the nerve. You told me to disappear, she said. She didn't turn around. You looked me in the eyes and you told me you never wanted to see me again. You told me I was nothing to you. Behind her, silence. I was pregnant when you said it, she said. I didn't know yet, but I was. She heard him draw a breath. I didn't choose to take your children from you, Damien. I chose to take them away from everything you are. She paused. I want you to understand the difference, because if we're going to have any kind of conversation about what comes next, and I know we have to, I know I can't stop it, you need to understand that difference. What I did to protect them, not to punish you. She started walking again. Claire, he said. She stopped. He'd used the name, the false name, the name that belonged to this town and this life, and the woman she had built from the ruins of the one he'd helped destroy. The property I came to look at, he said. His voice was careful. It's on the coast road, about a mile north of here. She turned around then. He was still sitting on the bench, elbows on knees, looking at her with the particular expression of a man who has just collided with the thing he has spent years trying not to think about and is still absorbing the impact. I paid the deposit this morning, he said, before I saw you. I'm closing the week after next. She stared at him. You bought a property in Harrow's Cove, she said. I was buying a property in Harrow's Cove, he said, before I knew you were here. The rain came back. She stood in it and looked at the man she had run from, who had somehow and impossibly arrived in the same small corner of the world she'd chosen to hide in, and the old familiar terror in her chest was doing battle with something else now, something angrier, something rawer, something that tasted like the beginning of grief or the end of it. Go back to New York, she said. I told you. I heard what you told me. She met his eyes. And I'm telling you this one time. Go back to New York, pull out of the property, and give me 48 hours to think. Because if you push me right now, if you don't give me 48 hours, I will take my children and I will disappear again, and the next time you won't find me." He held her gaze. That calculating thing in his eyes, the thing that had made him what he was, that had built an empire out of fear and precision, was doing something she couldn't quite read. 48 hours, he said. 48 hours. He stood up from the bench. He was taller standing. She'd forgotten again, or chosen to forget. "And if you run," he said, not threatening, just honest, which was somehow worse, "you're right. I'll find you, not because I want to control you, because I looked at my son's face this morning and I am done pretending that this isn't real." She left him standing in the rain. She walked back into town with her heart in her throat and her hands shaking slightly and the voice in her head that had kept her alive for 5 years saying, "Think, think, think, don't feel, think." But the other voice, the older one, the one she'd had before she learned to replace feeling with thinking, that voice was saying his name over and over, the way it had before everything. She pushed through the door of the cafe at 9:15. Dottie looked up from behind the counter with the face of a woman who knew something had happened and was professional enough not to ask about it while there were customers in the room. Savannah tied on her apron. She picked up the order pad. She took Table 2's request for a black coffee and a blueberry scone, and she brought it to them, and she smiled because she was Claire Mercer here, and Claire Mercer smiled. Claire Mercer had no history. Claire Mercer was fine. She got through the morning. She got through the lunch service. She smiled and poured coffee and rang up orders and chatted with the regulars about the weather and whether the lobster boats would be out this week given the forecast, and whether the new family that had bought the old Hutchins place was planning to stay through winter. She got through all of it. At 3:45, she walked to the school to pick up the twins. They came out in the knot of other children, Ethan already talking before he'd cleared the door. Something about a boy named Marcus who had brought a real compass to class, and Lily beside him with a drawing she'd made that morning. A house on a cliff with the ocean below it, and 4 figures standing in front of it, 1 tall woman and 2 small children, and at the edge, a 4th figure she hadn't included before. Tall, dark-coated, standing slightly apart. Savannah stared at the drawing. "Who's that?" she asked, keeping her voice even. Lily looked at the figure she'd drawn at the edge. "The man from this morning," she said, with the perfect simplicity of a child who had not yet learned that some observations were dangerous. "He was looking at us. I thought he looked sad." Savannah folded the drawing and put it in her jacket pocket. That night, after dinner, after baths, after 2 rounds of the story about the lighthouse keeper and his cat that Ethan required before he would consider sleeping, after she'd kissed Lily's forehead and turned off their lamp, she stood in the kitchen of her cottage and poured 2 fingers of whiskey she rarely drank, and she stared at the rain on the window and she thought about 48 hours. 24 of them were already gone. She thought about what he'd said. Not the part about not leaving. She'd expected that, or something like it. She thought about the other part. The property on the coast road. The deposit paid that morning. Before he knew. Coincidences happened. She was not a woman who believed in fate, who believed that the universe arranged things according to any agenda. She had too much evidence against that particular comfort. But she pulled Lily's drawing from her pocket and smoothed it flat on the kitchen table. 4 figures. The tall dark one at the edge, slightly apart, slightly tilted. The way a 5-year-old drew longing without knowing she was drawing longing. She pressed her thumb over the figure and held it there. Whatever she decided in the next 24 hours was going to change everything. She knew it the way she knew weather changes. Not in the details, but in the bones. She could feel the pressure of it, the particular stillness before a front moved in. She could run. She had run before, and she had survived it, and she could do it again. And part of her, the part that had learned to love the quiet, the routine, the cafe smell, and the sea glass hunts, and the 6-block walk to school, that part screamed at her to do it, to pack the bags, to get the twins into the car she still hadn't replaced and drive north until she hit another coast, another name, another life. But Lily had drawn him at the edge of the picture. And Ethan had said the man from this morning with a specific weight in his voice, the weight of a child who files a face away because something in them recognizes it without knowing what that recognition means. She finished the whiskey. She rinsed the glass. She turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark for a moment, listening to the ocean and her own heartbeat. 48 hours. 24 left. The rain kept falling. She went to bed. She did not sleep. And in the morning, when she came downstairs at 6:30 to start the coffee and found an envelope pushed under her front door, she was not entirely surprised. She stood in the gray light of the front room and held it for a long moment before she opened it. Inside was a single card. No letterhead, no address. 3 lines in his handwriting, which she recognized the same way she recognized his eyes, with a visceral, cellular certainty that her brain had nothing to do with. I have questions. Not demands. Questions. When you're ready, I'll be at the Meridian Inn. Whenever you're ready. She read it 3 times. Then she went to make the coffee, and to wake the children, and to find Ethan's shoe, and to get through another morning in the life she had built. But the card was in her pocket, and the man who'd written it was a mile up the coast road. And the children eating cereal at her kitchen table had his eyes and her stubbornness and a history they didn't know yet, a weight they hadn't been asked to carry, but that was already, inevitably, beginning to find them. She had 12 hours left, and she already knew she was going to that inn. She almost didn't go. That's what she told herself at 6:45 in the morning while she stood at the kitchen counter and watched the twins eat cereal and listened to Ethan explain his theory about why seagulls were smarter than people gave them credit for. She told herself she was going to put the card in the trash, call Dottie to open the cafe, and spend the day doing inventory and not thinking about the Meridian Inn or the man who was staying in it. She told herself that right up until she dropped the twins at school and found herself walking north on the coast road instead of east toward the cafe. The Meridian Inn was a converted Victorian at the top of a rise overlooking the water. 3 stories of gray-painted clapboard with white trim and a wraparound porch that had seen better decades. It was the only inn in Harrow's Cove that had more than 6 rooms, which made it the default accommodation for anyone who came to town with money. She had never had a reason to go inside it. She had spent 5 years being a woman who had no reasons to go inside places like this. She pushed through the front door anyway. The lobby was quiet. Nautical prints on the walls, a fireplace with a gas insert, a front desk staffed by a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She didn't stop at the desk. She didn't need to. Damien was already there, standing near the fireplace with a coffee cup in his hand, wearing a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, looking like a man who had not slept and had made a decision not to pretend otherwise. He saw her come in. Something in him went still, the way it always had. That complete physical quiet that she'd once mistaken for calm and had later understood was the opposite. It was the stillness of a man who had trained himself not to move when something important happened, because movement was information, and information was leverage, and he had built his entire existence on the principle that you never gave anyone leverage you hadn't chosen to give. She crossed the lobby and stopped 6 feet from him, close enough to talk, far enough to leave. "You came," he said. "Don't make it mean more than it does," she said. "I have questions too." He nodded at the armchairs by the fireplace. She didn't sit. He watched her not sit, then set his coffee cup on the mantel and put his hands in his pockets, which was a posture she recognized. It was how he stood when he was restraining himself from something. She'd seen it in boardrooms. She'd seen it in arguments. She'd seen it the night before she left, and then she'd seen his restraint break, and she'd learned what lived behind it. "How did you know about this town?" she asked. "I didn't. I told you. The property was a business acquisition. One of my analysts found it. Distressed commercial real estate on the Maine coast, good infrastructure for..." He stopped. "It doesn't matter. I didn't know you were here." "That's a significant coincidence." "Yes," he said. "It is." "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't expect anything from you." His jaw tightened slightly. "I stopped expecting things from you when you vanished. I looked for you for 8 months, Savannah. 8 months of nothing, and then I stopped, because I had to." He picked up the coffee cup again, seemed to realize he didn't actually want it, set it back down. "I didn't plant myself in your town. I'm not running an operation on you. No, you're just buying property a mile from where my children go to school. I didn't know they existed." The words landed flat and hard, the way true things do. She felt them settle. "So now you do," she said. "So now I do." He looked at her directly. "And I want to know them. I want..." He stopped, started again. "I'm not going to stand here and pretend I'm going to walk away clean from this. I'm not capable of it. I looked at that boy's face, And it was like looking at a photograph of myself at 5 years old, except I don't have any photographs of myself at 5 years old because my father was not the kind of man who kept photographs. And that's... He stopped again, exhaled. I'm going to be in their lives. I need you to understand that's not a threat. It's just what's real. And what are you offering them? She kept her voice level. She was proud of how level it was. A father who runs the most dangerous criminal organization on the East Coast? School pickups from an armored car? A name that people are afraid of? I'm offering them a father. That's not a complete sentence. His eyes sharpened. I know what I am. Do you? She stepped closer. One step, just enough to close the distance from comfortable to confrontational. Because I remember a man who told me that love was a liability. I remember a man who kept 2 guns in the bedroom nightstand and never told me why until I found the body in the parking garage of our building. I remember a man who looked me in the eyes after 5 years together and told me to disappear from his life. Her voice stayed level through all of it, which cost her more than she could account for. That's the man you're offering my children a relationship with. They're my children too. Biologically. Yes. The word hit him. She watched it hit him. He went very still again, the particular stillness of someone absorbing impact and deciding how to answer it. That's not fair, he said. No, she agreed. It isn't. None of this is fair. You don't get to be the one to raise that point. A silence stretched between them. The gas fireplace made a soft sound. Somewhere in the back of the inn, someone was running a vacuum. Sit down, he said. It was not a command, or it was a command, but the kind that came from exhaustion rather than authority. Please. She sat. He sat across from her. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and for a moment he looked like a man rather than what he was. Just tired, gray-eyed, wet-haired, 38 years old, and sitting in a lobby in Maine, trying to negotiate with someone who had every reason not to negotiate with him. Ask me what you came to ask, he said. She'd rehearsed the question on the walk over. She'd assembled it carefully, and then she said it and it came out nothing like she'd rehearsed it. What actually happened that night with Vanessa? His face changed. It was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a compression of his mouth. But she knew his face well enough that subtle registered like a flare. He looked at her for a long moment, and in that moment she saw something she hadn't expected. Not guilt, not deflection, not the prepared denial of a man who'd had 5 years to construct a story. She saw anger, old anger, the kind that had been sitting somewhere, compressed, waiting for the moment it could finally go somewhere. She set it up, he said. 3 words. She'd been prepared for anything except the certainty in those 3 words. She came to the penthouse while you were at the firm dinner, he said. She said she needed to talk. I should have told her to leave. I knew something was wrong with her. I'd seen it building for months, the way she looked at me, the things she said. But I let her in because she was your sister, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. His voice was flat and deliberate, the voice of someone reciting something they've turned over many times in the dark. She was crying. She told me something had happened to her, that she was in trouble. I put my hands on her shoulders to settle her down, because she was shaking, and I thought, you thought she was genuinely upset. Yes. His eyes held hers. And then the door opened, and you were there. And in the 2 seconds it took you to process what you were looking at, she pressed herself against me. He paused. I pushed her back immediately. I told her to get out. I turned around to explain, and you were already gone, Savannah said. You were gone. He said it like the fact of it still had edges on it. And your phone went to voicemail, and her phone went to voicemail. And by the time I got anyone to answer, your doorman was telling me you'd come home, packed a bag, and left. She sat very still. You never called me, she said. After. You never... I called 27 times in the first 2 days. His voice didn't rise. I have the records. I can show you the records. My number changed. I know. I found the new number. A muscle in his jaw moved. You picked up once, do you remember? She remembered. 14 months after she'd left. She'd been in Portsmouth still, working at a hotel front desk under her new name, 6 months pregnant and exhausted and stupid enough to answer a number she didn't recognize because she was expecting a call from her obstetrician. She'd heard his voice and she'd hung up immediately, and then she'd sat in the bathroom of the hotel's staff room and shaken for 20 minutes. "You hung up," he said. "Yes. I tried again and the number was dead. You disconnected it within the hour." "Yes." He sat back. He ran a hand over his face, a gesture she recognized, the one he made when he was at the end of something and knew it. "I spent a year looking, Savannah. Private investigators, resources most people don't have. You were just gone." He looked at her. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you so you understand that I didn't give up because I stopped caring. I gave up because you were clearly determined not to be found, and I didn't think I had the right to override that determination." "And the night I left," she said, "what you said to me." He went quiet. "You said you never wanted to see me again," she said. "You said if I walked out the door, I was dead to you. You said, I know what I said. You said it because you thought I'd been with someone else." She watched his face. "You saw what you walked in on. Me, standing there looking at the two of you. And you assumed I was reacting to my own guilt. You thought I ran because I'd done something, not because I'd seen something." He was very still. "Yes," he said. "So when you told me to disappear, I was furious. I was wrong. He stopped, his hands pressed flat on his knees. "I was 23 different kinds of an idiot, and there's nothing I can say about that night that makes it less of what it was." She looked at him for a long time. The gas fireplace made its small sound. "You're asking me to believe," she said slowly, "that Vanessa staged the whole thing, that she engineered an intimate-looking scenario in our home, knowing I was going to come back early from the dinner." "Yes." "That takes a specific kind of deliberate cruelty." "Yes," he said. "It does." He looked at her. "Have you talked to her? In the 5 years, has she reached out?" Savannah shook her head. "I told you, I disappeared. No one knew where I went." "She knew more than you'd think," he said. Something in his voice shifted on that last line. She caught it. A tightening, something guarded coming back into his face after the unguarded minutes they'd just had. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means that 4 months after you left, Vanessa came to see me." He looked at the fireplace. "She came to comfort me." That was how she put it. His voice went flat in a way that communicated exactly what kind of comfort had been offered. "When I told her to get out, she told me you'd left because you'd found out the truth, that you'd discovered something about me that she'd made sure you found out, because she'd been trying to get you away from me for years." He paused. "She thought I'd—" He stopped. "What?" It was not a question. It was a demand, and it came out harder than she intended. "She thought I'd be grateful," he said. "She thought that without you there, I'd turn to her. That was the plan. 5 years of her being obsessed with a man who was in love with her sister, and the plan was to take away the sister." Savannah stood up. She didn't do it deliberately. Her body just made the decision. The same way it had made the decision to walk north this morning, operating on some frequency below conscious thought. She stood up and crossed to the window and looked at the gray water below the inn's landscaping and pressed one hand flat against the cold glass and breathed. She thought about every version of the story she had told herself for 5 years. The story of the betrayal, of the proof she'd seen with her own eyes, of the man she'd trusted and the sister she'd loved, and the specific crushing arithmetic of losing both of them on the same night. She had built her whole escape on that story. She had built 2 children's lives on it. She had built herself, Claire Mercer, Harrow's Cove, the cafe and the sea glass, and the 6-block walk, and the carefully maintained quiet, on the bedrock certainty that she had seen what she had seen. She had seen what Vanessa had arranged for her to see. "I want proof," she said. Her voice came out strange, stripped down like a wire with the insulation pulled off. "I have it." He said it immediately, which told her he'd been waiting for this. He reached inside his sweater and produced a folded piece of paper, printed pages from the look of it, and held them out without moving from the chair, giving her the choice to come and take them or not. She came and took them. Printed transcripts, phone records, dates, times, a message thread between a phone number she didn't recognize and Vanessa's number, She recognized the last 4 digits from 5 years ago, had them in her memory with the particular permanence of things you don't choose to remember. The messages dated from the week before the night in the penthouse. She read them standing up. She read them twice. The first read was clinical, the way you read a contract. The second read was not. By the second read, her hands had started shaking slightly, and she was pressing her lips together hard because something was trying to come up from her chest, and she was not going to let it. Not here, not in front of him. She set the pages on the arm of the chair. "Where did these come from?" she said. "My people pulled them when I started looking into what happened. After Vanessa came to see me. I've had them for 4 years. 4 years. The number sat in her chest like a coal. 4 years, she said. I couldn't find you. I had the proof and I couldn't. He stopped, looked at her steadily. I know what you're thinking. What? You don't, she said. Because what I'm thinking is that I spent 4 years of my children's lives, 4 years of Ethan not having a father, 4 years of Lily drawing strangers at the edge of her pictures because she has some instinct that her family is incomplete. I spent 4 years of that on a lie that you could have broken if you'd been able to find me. She looked at him. I'm not saying it's your fault you couldn't find me. I know I made myself impossible to find. I'm asking you to sit with the arithmetic of it. He sat with it. She watched him do it, watched the math of it move through him, all those lost years adding themselves up. I know, he said again. His voice was rough. I need to think, she said. I need time to... Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out automatically. Dottie. She almost let it go to voicemail, but Dottie never called during service without a reason, so she answered. Dottie. Claire. Dottie's voice was strange, too careful, too neutral, the voice she used when there was something in the room she didn't want to talk about in front of. There's someone here at the cafe, asking for you. Savannah's attention sharpened. Who? A pause. She says she's your sister, Dottie said. The word landed like a stone dropped from height. Savannah's hand tightened on the phone. She turned toward the window so her face was away from Damien, though she didn't know why. Some instinct to keep this private for 10 more seconds, while she still could. Tell her I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said. She hung up. She stood at the window for 3 seconds. 3. Then she turned around. Damien was watching her with the focused stillness of a man who has read a room his entire life and is reading it now. I have to go, she said. What happened? Nothing. Savannah. I said I need to go. She picked up her jacket from the arm of the chair. She was already moving toward the door. We'll talk later. I need to... Who called? She stopped at the door. She turned around and looked at him across the length of the lobby and said the word with all the things she couldn't say packed behind it. Vanessa, she said. She's at my cafe. Damien stood up. Something moved across his face, not surprise, not quite. The look of a man who has been waiting for a board to fall and is now watching it fall and is running the calculations of what it takes down with it. Don't go alone, he said. She's my sister. She's the person who destroyed your life on purpose. His voice was quiet and absolute. Don't go alone. Savannah looked at him. She thought about Lily's drawing, the figure at the edge, slightly tilted, the way a child drew someone who was waiting to be let in. She thought about 5 years and a lie, and a woman who had orchestrated it all and was now somehow standing in her cafe in the life she had built to escape her. She thought about how Vanessa had always known exactly where to find the knife, how she had always known exactly when to use it. Stay here, she said to Damien. I mean it. Give me 20 minutes. She didn't wait for him to answer. She pushed out the inn's front door into the gray morning and started walking fast, and the cold air hit her face, and her hands were still shaking slightly, and somewhere ahead of her, sitting in her cafe with a cup of coffee and probably a pleasant expression, was the woman who had taken everything from her once already and had just walked back into her carefully constructed life with the ease of someone who had never stopped knowing exactly where she was. 20 minutes. She walked faster. Vanessa Whitmore had always known how to arrange herself. That was the first thing Savannah registered when she pushed through the cafe door and saw her sister sitting at the corner table by the window. The one with the best light, the one the regulars competed for on Sunday mornings. Vanessa was arranged in it like a woman who had chosen it on purpose, legs crossed, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug, hair the color of dark honey falling in the kind of effortless waves that took 40 minutes to produce. She was wearing a cream-colored coat that belonged in a Manhattan restaurant, not a Maine fishing town, and she looked— this was the part that hit Savannah first. Before the anger, before anything organized, she looked exactly the same. 5 years. She looked exactly the same. Savannah stood in the doorway for 1 full second. The breakfast crowd had thinned to 2 tables. An older couple near the counter, a man working a laptop by the door. Dottie was behind the espresso machine, pretending to clean it, watching with the peripheral vision of a woman who had raised 4 sons and learned to observe crises without appearing to. Vanessa looked up. She smiled. It was a real smile. Or it used the same muscles a real smile used, which had always been the problem with Vanessa. She had always been able to make the right expressions. She had always been fluent in the language of warmth while operating in a completely different register underneath. "Claire," she said, with a gentle emphasis on the false name that communicated quietly and precisely that she knew it was false. Savannah crossed the cafe. She pulled out the chair across from her sister and sat down and put both hands flat on the table and said nothing for a moment, just looked, because she needed the 2 seconds to get her breathing under control, and because she had learned in 5 years of building a life from nothing that the first person to speak in a confrontation gives away more than they mean to. Vanessa let the silence sit. She'd always been good at that, too. "How did you find me?" Savannah said. "It took a while." Vanessa tilted her head slightly. "You did a very thorough job. The name, the paperwork, all of it. You were always meticulous." A small pause. "It was actually the cafe that gave you away. Someone mentioned it in a travel form. Mercer's Cafe, Harrow's Cove. A reviewer said the owner had real New York energy. Isn't that funny?" "Hilarious," Savannah said. Vanessa's smile stayed in place. "You look well. The shorter hair suits you." "Why are you here, Vanessa?" "I came to see you." She said it with a slight lift, as if the answer were obvious. "You're my sister. You disappeared for 5 years. I've been worried." "You've been worried." "Of course." Her voice stayed gentle and smooth, the voice she used in rooms where she needed to control how she was perceived. "Whatever happened between us, whatever you think happened, you're still my family." Savannah looked at her sister's face. She looked at the familiar architecture of it, the cheekbones, the jaw, the eyes that were almost the same shade as her own, but not quite, something slightly cooler in them, the way blue could look warm or not depending on the light. She had loved this face. She had trusted this face. She had told this face things she had never told anyone, had leaned on the woman behind it through the deaths of their parents, through every difficult year before and after, had believed with the profound and stupid conviction of someone who has never been betrayed by family, that the bond between them was one of the fixed things in a world with very few fixed things. "I know what you did," Savannah said. Vanessa's expression didn't change. That was information. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "I've seen the messages." Savannah kept her voice flat and even. "The ones you sent to whoever you had in that penthouse with you. The staging, the timing. I know you knew when I was coming home, and I know you set up exactly what I was going to walk into. A beat." The cafe was very quiet. The couple near the counter was paying their bill. The man with the laptop had put in earbuds. Vanessa set her coffee mug down. "Where did you get that?" she said. Her voice had shifted, not dramatically, just a slight drop in temperature. "Does it matter?" "It matters if someone's been feeding you fabricated." "He has phone records, Vanessa. Transcripts." Savannah leaned forward slightly. "You texted from your own phone. That's the part I keep coming back to. You were so certain I was never coming back, you didn't even bother to be careful." Something moved through Vanessa's face then. Not guilt. She'd expected guilt, or at least the performance of it. What moved through her face was something sharper than guilt, something that looked almost like impatience, like a woman who has been managing a situation for a long time and is tired of managing it. "You don't understand what you're talking about," Vanessa said. "Then explain it to me." "He wasn't good for you." She said it quietly, with conviction, leaning forward slightly herself so the table between them narrowed. "He wasn't. You were disappearing, Savannah. You were losing yourself. The firm, your friends, everything you'd built. You were throwing all of it away to orbit a man who kept half his life behind doors he never opened for you, who had people working for him, who did things that... She stopped, her jaw set. You deserved better. So you decided for me. Someone had to. The words landed without apology, without the softening of regret. Savannah sat back in her chair slowly. The air between them had changed in texture. Something had been stripped away, some last layer of pretense, and what was underneath it was not what she'd expected. She'd expected Vanessa to deflect, to cry, to construct the elaborate alternative story that people who have done something unforgivable always constructed. She hadn't expected this. The calm, the conviction, the absence of any apparent understanding that what she had done was wrong. You thought you were protecting me, Savannah said. I was protecting you. You destroyed my life. I redirected it. Vanessa's voice was still gentle, still the voice of a woman who believed what she was saying. And yes, it was hard at first. I understand that. But you built something here, a real life, a quieter life. You have the cafe, you have the children, my children. Something crystallized in Savannah's chest. You know about the children. I knew you were pregnant when you left. A small pause. I kept track of you as best I could. I knew you'd had twins, a boy and a girl. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 5 years of believing she was invisible, 5 years of the careful architecture of disappearance. And her sister had known. Not exactly, not precisely, but enough. Had always known enough. You knew I was pregnant, Savannah said. Yes. You knew I was carrying his children, and you said nothing. You let me run. She was proud, distantly, of how even her voice stayed. You let me raise them alone for 5 years, on a fabricated identity, in a town that wasn't mine because you thought you knew what was better for me. He's dangerous, Savannah. He's their father. The word father dropped between them and didn't bounce. It just sat there, heavy and exact. Vanessa's composure shifted for the first time. Not much. A fractional tightening around the eyes, then, he's here, isn't he? It was not a question. Her gaze moved to the cafe window, to the coast road visible through the glass. He found you. He's here on a business matter. He didn't know I was in this town. Of course he didn't. She said it in a tone that might have been disbelief. It was a coincidence. There are no coincidences with men like Damian Blackwood. Everything he does is... Stop. Savannah stood up. I am done sitting here while you explain to me what you know about my life and my children's father. I want you to leave. I want you to get in whatever car you drove here in, and I want you to go back to wherever you came from, and I want you to stay out of my life. Vanessa looked up at her from the chair. She looked calm. That was the wrong reaction. She should have been afraid or defensive or at minimum embarrassed. She looked calm. I can't do that, she said. You don't have a choice. Savannah, she said the real name quietly. Sit back down. I'm not. He's going to take them. Her voice hadn't risen, hadn't sharpened, remained in that terrible, gentle register. That's what men like him do. He'll see those children, and he'll want them because they're his, because everything is a possession to him, and he will use every resource he has to get custody, and you will spend the rest of your legal existence as Claire Mercer, a woman who doesn't officially exist, fighting a man with 200 lawyers and an empire. She paused. I'm trying to help you. Savannah looked at her sister's face, looked at it for a long time. Get out of my cafe, she said. Vanessa stood. She smoothed her cream-colored coat. She picked up her bag from the floor beside the chair with the care of a woman who kept her belongings in order. She looked at Savannah with something in her face that Savannah had never had the right name for. Something that had been there her whole life. Something she had misread as love for 30 years, and said very quietly, I'll be in town for a few days. When you're ready to think clearly, call me. She left. Savannah stood at the table and watched her sister walk out the door and turn north on the coast road, and she counted to 10 in her head because that was what she did when she was preventing herself from doing something irreversible. Dottie appeared at her elbow with a glass of water. Not your sister the way most people mean sister, Dottie said. No, Savannah said. Not exactly. She drank the water. She thought. She called Damien from the back room of the cafe, where the dry goods were stored and the noise from the street was muffled, and when he picked up on the second ring, she said, "She was here. She knows." And she said something about custody. A pause. "Where's she now?" "Walking north on the coast road, toward the inn." Another pause, longer. She could hear him thinking in it. The particular quality of his silences when he was running calculations. "I need you to do something," he said. "Don't tell me what to do. I need you to go get the twins from school, right now. Don't wait for the regular pickup. Get them and take them home and don't leave them alone." His voice was measured, but she had known it long enough to hear what was underneath the measure. "I've seen what Vanessa does when she feels cornered. She didn't come here to apologize, and she didn't come here to protect you. She came because something changed, something made her move." "What something?" "I don't know yet, but she showed up the same day I did, and that's not—" He stopped. "Not a coincidence," she said. "Go get your children," he said. She went. She called the school from the sidewalk and told them she was coming for an early pickup, family matter, and she walked fast, faster than she normally walked, faster than a woman in a quiet coastal town had any reason to walk at 11 in the morning, and she had covered 4 blocks of the 6 before her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. She stopped walking. She looked at the screen. The text was a photograph. It took her brain a second to process what she was looking at. The image was slightly grainy, shot from some distance with a long lens. The parking lot of the elementary school, she recognized the chain-link fence and the red brick corner of the building. In the image, a woman in a cream-colored coat was standing beside a dark SUV with 2 small figures beside her, 2 small figures in yellow slicker jackets. The text beneath the photo said, "They came to me. I didn't go to them. Isn't that interesting?" Savannah started running. She covered the remaining 2 blocks in less than 90 seconds, running in a way she hadn't run since before the pregnancy. Her lungs burning with cold air, her jacket flying open, her phone still in her hand. And when she came around the corner to the school's front entrance and saw the parking lot, empty, the chain-link gate hanging open, the space where the SUV had been nothing but a wet rectangle of asphalt, she made a sound she didn't recognize as coming from herself. She called the school's front desk, already moving toward the entrance. The receptionist answered. "Ethan and Lily Mercer," she said. Her voice was almost steady. "Are they in class?" A pause, the sound of a keyboard. "Ms. Mercer, they were signed out about 20 minutes ago." A longer pause, apologetic and confused. "By their aunt. We have the form from the beginning of the year, their emergency contacts." "She's not their aunt." The words came out very quiet. "She's not their anything. Call the police." She hung up and called Damien. He picked up before the first ring finished. She didn't know how that was possible. "She took them," Savannah said. "She took my children." 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then, "Which direction did the car go?" "I don't know. I wasn't—" Her voice broke on the last word, the first time it had broken, and she pressed it back together viciously and said, "South on the coast road. The school is on the south end of town. The car was a dark SUV. I don't have a plate. I only have—" She looked at her phone screen, at the photograph. "She sent me a photo, a dark SUV, main plates from the angle, but I can't read the number. Send it to me." Already moving, she could hear it in his voice, the shift from calculation to action, the particular compression of a man who had spent his adult life managing catastrophes. "Get back to the inn, right now. I need you in front of me, not on the street. I'm not going to the inn while my children—" "Savannah," his voice cut through cleanly. "Not cruel, exact. You can't find them alone. You don't have the resources. I do. But I need you here so I can move without worrying about where you are. A beat. Please, let me do the one thing I can actually do right now." She was already walking toward the inn. Her legs had made the decision again without her. "If anything happens to them," she said, "nothing is going to happen to them." "You don't know that." "No," he said, "but I know what I'm willing to do to make sure it's true, and that's more than most people have." She walked the mile to the Meridian Inn in 11 minutes, which should have taken 20. When she pushed through the front door, Damien was in the lobby with 2 men she hadn't seen before. Large, quiet, the kind of men who occupied space without drawing attention to it. He crossed to her immediately. He didn't touch her. He looked at her face and she looked at his, and in that moment, with her children gone and 5 years of constructed distance between them, she understood something she had been refusing to understand since she'd seen him on the rain-soaked street. He was afraid too. He was covering it with the efficiency, with the phone calls and the resource deployment and the controlled voice, but underneath all of it, he was a man who had found out he had a son and a daughter 6 hours ago and had just lost them before he'd heard their voices. She didn't take them for herself, he said. His voice was low. She can't use them against you. You're Claire Mercer. You have nothing. She took them to use against me. Then who is she using them for? He looked at her. His jaw tightened. 3 years ago, he said, I ended a business arrangement with a man named Vincent Morelli. The ending was not friendly. He's been building a case against me since, looking for leverage, for a vulnerability. He paused. I think Vanessa found him, or he found her. I think they've been planning this since before either of us arrived in Harrow's Cove. The coincidence. The property on the coast road. She ran the math in her head with the sick mechanical focus of someone doing arithmetic to stay functional. She led you here, Savannah said. I think so. She found me first. She led you here, knowing you'd find me, knowing you'd find out about the children. And that I wouldn't leave, he said. Because I wouldn't. She knew I wouldn't leave. The lobby of the Meridian Inn was very quiet. The young man at the front desk was pretending not to exist. The gas fireplace made its small, indifferent sound. Savannah looked at the man across from her, the man she had run from, the man she had built 5 years of silence against, the man whose eyes lived in her son's face, and she felt the last of the structure she had constructed fall away. The careful distance, the Claire Mercer architecture, the practiced maintained separateness that had kept her sane and kept her children safe and kept the past in its box behind its door. All of it gone. What was left underneath was not the woman she'd been before either. It was something else. Something that had been built in the years between, in the hard mornings and the single-parent exhaustion and the sea-glass hunts and the 6-block walks. In every moment she had looked at her children and understood what she was capable of. Tell me what you need from me, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Something shifted in his face. Everything, he said. Outside, the rain had stopped. The coast road stretched south in gray afternoon light, empty and quiet, carrying her children away from her in a direction she couldn't yet see. But she was done being a woman who ran. She was done being a woman who disappeared. She was done building boxes for the things that mattered most to her and locking them away where nothing could reach them, because nothing that mattered could survive. The first hour was the worst, not because nothing was happening. Things were happening at a velocity that Savannah had no frame of reference for, a controlled violence of phone calls and coded conversations, and men appearing in the Meridian Inn's lobby like they had been assembled from the walls. But because none of it was her. She was standing in the center of a machine she didn't control, watching it move, and her children were somewhere south of Harrow's Cove in a dark SUV. And every minute that passed was a minute she couldn't get back. Damien worked the phone with the focused brutality of a man who had built an organization on the premise that information was the only currency that mattered. She watched him from across the lobby and cataloged the calls by what she could read in his face. The first 3 were logistical, dispatching people. She could tell by the brevity and the directions. The 4th made his jaw tighten. The 5th made something cold move through his eyes that she recognized from years ago. From the moments when the world behind the doors she couldn't open had pressed itself against the surface of the life they'd shared. He hung up the 5th call and crossed to her immediately. Plate came back, he said. The SUV is registered to a shell company out of Providence. It's Morelli's. He paused. They're not heading north. My people picked up movement on the I-95 corridor. They're going south, toward Boston. Boston. Morelli has a facility outside the harbor. Industrial. He's used it before for... He stopped, chose different words. It's secure, off the public grid. She held his gaze. How long to get there? 3 hours by road, less if we move now. He was already looking past her at the 2 men by the door. I have a car outside. There are 2 more of my people meeting us on the road. I'm coming. I know. She had expected the argument, the version of this conversation where he told her to stay, where he deployed the practical logic of keeping her safe and out of the way. The fact that he didn't argue told her something about how serious this was. or about how much he'd processed about who she was now versus who she'd been, or both. They were in the car in 4 minutes. A black SUV, different from the one Vanessa had used, large and fast and carrying the particular smell of machinery and something chemical that she didn't ask about. Damien sat in the front passenger seat. One of the quiet men drove. The other sat beside Savannah in the back, facing forward, not speaking. She watched Maine blur past the window and kept her hands flat on her thighs and breathed through her nose in the slow, deliberate pattern she had developed in the first months after she'd left New York, when the panic attacks had been frequent and she'd needed a tool to survive them. In through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out through the mouth for 8. It had worked then. It worked now, barely. "Tell me about Morelli," she said. Damien turned slightly in the front seat. "Why?" "Because I'm walking into wherever he is in 3 hours, and I want to know who I'm dealing with." A pause. Then, Vincent Morelli, 44, 3rd generation. His grandfather built the operation in the 60s. His father consolidated it in the 90s. Vincent inherited it 8 years ago when his father had a stroke and has spent every year since trying to expand east. His voice was clipped and factual, the debrief voice. "We had an arrangement for 3 years. Mutual non-interference, some shared logistics. I terminated it when I found out he was moving product through channels that violated the terms. He took the termination as a personal insult. Is he violent? He's organized, controlled. He prefers leverage to force because force is expensive and leverage is renewable." He paused. "But if he feels cornered, yes, he's violent. And the children," Damien's jaw worked. "He won't hurt them. They're worth more to him intact. They're leverage. The only leverage he has that he knows I'll respond to." He turned to face forward again. "He wants a negotiation. He wants something from me, and Ethan and Lily are how he forces me to the table. And Vanessa." A longer pause. "She made a deal with him," Damien said. "I don't know the terms. I don't know when it started, but she got him the information, where you were, the children, the timing of my arrival. She delivered all of it, and whatever he promised her in exchange, she thought he'd remove you," Savannah said. "She thought that if Morelli had leverage over you, you'd be finished. And with you finished, I'd have no reason to go back to New York. No reason to go back to any of it. That's my read. She was willing to use my children to accomplish that." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She pressed her head back against the seat and closed her eyes for 30 seconds and let herself feel the full weight of it. Not the fear, which she'd been managing, but the grief. The grief for the sister she'd thought she had. The grief for the 30 years of believing in something that had been a different shape than she'd thought. It moved through her, and she let it move through her, because there wasn't time to process it, and she knew from experience that unprocessed grief would find a worse moment to surface. Better to acknowledge it now and put it somewhere she could reach later. She opened her eyes. "When we get there," she said. "What's the approach?" Damien glanced back at her. Something in his face, something she couldn't fully name, shifted. "My people go in first," he said. "How many?" 7, including the 2 in this car. 2 more meeting us at the facility perimeter. 9 against whatever Morelli has in there. It's enough. You sound confident." "I've done more with less." He held her gaze. "My people know what they're doing. You stay back until the children are located and secured, and then I'm not staying back. Savannah, they're 5 years old." Her voice was level and cold and left no room for negotiation. "They've never been away from me overnight. They don't know you. They don't know any of your people. And if one of your men comes through a door in a dark building, they are going to be terrified. They need to see my face." She paused. "I'm not staying back." He looked at her for a long moment. "Stay behind me," he said. "Fine. I mean it. You stay behind me or I will physically put you back in this car." "Understood." They drove. The facility appeared in the headlights at 4:15 in the afternoon. The light had gone from gray to dark fast, the coast October dark that came early and landed hard. It was a converted shipping warehouse, massive and low, set back from the water behind a chain-link perimeter fence. No signage. 2 loading bays on the visible side, both closed. Sodium vapor lights on the exterior corners throwing orange pools onto wet concrete. The driver cut the headlights a 1/4 mile out and rolled them to a stop behind a line of scrub growth that bordered the access road. The second car materialized out of the dark 30 seconds later, quiet, and 4 more men came out of it with the unhurried efficiency of people who had done this before. Damien got out of the car. Savannah got out of the car. He looked at her over the roof of the vehicle, and she looked back, and neither of them said anything. One of the men, older, with a gray-shot beard and the kind of face that had been through weather, came to Damien with a phone screen showing a floor plan. They spoke in low voices for 2 minutes. She couldn't hear all of it. She heard East Loading Bay, 2 on the door, interior count unknown, generator on the south side. Then Damien turned to her. "Phone," he said. She handed it over without asking why. He turned it off, not silenced, turned off, and handed it back. "Stay close," he said. "Don't speak unless you have to. If I say down, you go down without hesitating." "Yes." "If I say back, you go back to the car. If the children are secured and I say back, you go back to the car with them. Yes or no?" "Yes." He held her eyes for 1 more second. Then he turned and they moved. She had never done anything like this. She wanted to be clear with herself about that, even in the middle of it. She was not a woman with training or experience in this kind of movement through darkness toward a building containing armed men and her children. She was a woman who ran a cafe and walked 6 blocks to school every morning, and the fact that she was crouched behind a concrete barrier at the east side of a shipping warehouse at 4:15 in the afternoon was a fact her brain kept trying to reject and her body kept overriding. Her heart was enormous in her chest. She could feel it in her throat, in her fingertips, in the back of her teeth. 2 of Damien's men went to the east loading bay door. She didn't see what they did to it. She was 10 feet back behind Damien, watching his shoulders for information. The door opened without the noise she'd been bracing for. The 2 men went in, 30 seconds of silence. Then a hand signal she couldn't fully read, but Damien moved forward and she moved with him. Inside was dark and smelled of salt water and diesel and something metallic she didn't want to identify. The loading bay opened into a long corridor with concrete walls and industrial lighting that buzzed and flickered at irregular intervals. Crates stacked along the walls, some of them marked with shipping notations in languages she couldn't identify. The floor was bare concrete, wet in patches from water that had come in somewhere. She counted doors. 3 on the right, 2 on the left, all closed. They moved down the corridor in a tight configuration. 2 men leading, Damien behind them, Savannah behind Damien, 2 more men at the rear. She focused on the back of Damien's coat and kept her breathing in the 4-4-8 pattern and didn't let herself think about anything except the next step and the next door. The sound came from the 3rd door on the right. She heard it before anyone reacted to it. A child's voice, high and indistinct, cut off quickly. Her body registered it before her brain finished processing it, and she had taken 2 steps forward before Damien's arm came back and blocked her. Not roughly, but absolutely. "Wait," he said under his breath. "That was... I heard it. Wait." The 2 lead men were already at the door. They looked back at Damien. He nodded once. The door came open fast and hard, and she was moving before she'd decided to move, around Damien's arm, through the door, and into the room, and... Ethan and Lily were sitting on the floor against the far wall. They were in their yellow, slicker jackets. Lily had her knees pulled to her chest. Ethan was sitting straight, his jaw set with the particular stubborn courage of a child refusing to cry. And when the door opened, he flinched hard, and then his eyes found her face, and... "Mom." The word came out of him like something that had been held under pressure. She crossed the room in 4 steps and went to her knees on the concrete and got both arms around both of them and pressed her face into the space between their heads and let herself have 3 seconds of it. 3 seconds of the smell of their hair and the grip of their small hands, and Lily saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama," in a voice that was mostly steady, but not entirely. 3 seconds. Then she pulled back and looked at their faces with her hands on their cheeks, checking, reading, cataloging. Scared but unhurt. Lily's eyes were red from crying. Ethan had a scrape on his palm from something. Neither of them was... They were okay. They were okay. "Are you hurt?" she said. "No," Ethan said. His voice was trying to be older than it was. "Lily." "I want to go home," Lily said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "We're going, right now." Savannah stood, kept one hand on each of them. She turned to Damien, who was standing in the doorway, looking at the three of them with an expression that had no armor in it whatsoever, raw and unguarded, and 20 kinds of wrecked in a way that she filed away because there was no time for it now, but she was not going to forget it. "They're okay," she said. He nodded once. His throat moved. "Get them to the car," he said. "Damien, I'll be right behind you." His voice had recovered its control, but just barely. "Take them to the car." She took the children toward the door. One of the men, the gray-bearded one, fell into step beside them, positioning himself between them and the rest of the corridor. And she accepted this without argument because she had made her agreements and she kept them. They were halfway down the corridor when she heard it. A door at the far end opened. Not the way their door had opened, not fast and tactical, but deliberately, with the ease of a man who was not surprised. The footsteps that followed were unhurried. She pulled the twins close against the corridor wall and looked back. Vincent Morelli was not what she'd assembled in her head from Damien's description. She'd built something larger, something more visibly brutal. What came down the corridor toward them was a man of medium height in his mid-40s, lean, in a dark suit that fit him well, with the composed, slightly detached expression of someone who had run the calculation and found the result acceptable. Behind him, two men. Beside him, one step back, her coat still cream-colored, somehow still unwrinkled, as if disorder were something that happened to other people's clothing. Vanessa. Savannah pressed the twins against the wall. Ethan made a sound. "It's okay," she said, low and even, to her children. Then, to the gray-bearded man beside her, "Stay with them." She stepped forward, one step, just enough. Morelli stopped walking 15 feet away. He looked at her with the mild interest of a man assessing a variable he hadn't expected to encounter. "Ms. Mercer," he said. His voice was northeastern, educated, the kind of voice that had been polished in private schools. Or Whitmore, I suppose, given the circumstances. She didn't answer. "Where is he?" Morelli said. "Right here." Damien's voice came from behind her. He'd come up from somewhere, from a different direction, and she heard his footsteps, and then he was beside her, and the corridor narrowed with the weight of what was in it. Morelli looked at Damien. Damien looked at Morelli. The two men behind Morelli moved their hands. Three of Damien's men materialized from the doors on either side of the corridor with the timing of something rehearsed, and for a moment the corridor was a held breath, everyone calculating simultaneously, the whole scene balanced on a point so fine it could have gone either way. Morelli let the moment sit. Then he smiled slightly and held his hands away from his sides. "I have a proposal," he said. "You're not in a position to make proposals," Damien said. "I'm in the position I've been in for the last 2 hours while you drove down from Harrow's Cove." His voice was unmoved. "I let you find the children, Damien. I could have moved them before you arrived. I chose not to. You let us find them. I wanted you in the building. I wanted exactly this." He looked at the corridor, the standoff, the geometry of it. "I don't want the children. I want a conversation I haven't been able to have because you've been unavailable for 3 years. He paused. "Send the family to the car. Let's talk." Damien said nothing for a moment. She could feel him thinking beside her, could feel the processing of it, the angles and outcomes running silent and fast. "Savannah," he said quietly, "I'm not leaving you in here. I need you to take them to the car." "Damien, he's right that I need to hear what he has to say." His voice was low, just for her. "And I can't hear it while I'm watching you." A pause. "Please." She looked at Morelli. She looked at Vanessa, who was standing slightly behind him with her eyes on Savannah and an expression that was... She tried to read it and couldn't, entirely. Not triumphant, not guilty. Something else. Something that looked almost like grief, which was perhaps the most infuriating thing she had ever seen on another person's face. She looked back at Damien. 10 minutes, she said. "Yes." "If you're not out in 10 minutes, I'm coming back in." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "I know." She went back to her children. She took Ethan's hand and Lily's hand and she walked them down the corridor and out the east loading bay door into the cold Atlantic night. And when the air hit her face, she exhaled for what felt like the first time in 4 hours. The gray-bearded man walked them to the car. She got the twins into the back seat and climbed in after them and pulled them both against her sides, and felt their hands grip her jacket and listened to their breathing slow, irregular at first, then steadier, then almost normal, children being children, recovering faster than she would, than any adult would. "Mom," Ethan said. He was pressed against her left side, his face against her shoulder. "That man." She looked down at him. "The man from the street," Ethan said. "The one in the rain. He was in there." "Yes," she said. "He found us," Ethan said. Not a question. The way children sometimes stated things that were simultaneously simpler and more profound than the adult version of the same observation. "He found you," she said. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, against Savannah's right shoulder, "Is he going to stay?" The question sat in the cold car in the dark outside a warehouse that was still holding the man who was the answer to it, and Savannah looked out the window at the door they'd come through, at the sodium vapor light casting its orange circle on the wet concrete, and she thought about all the answers she had and all the ones she didn't. "I think so," she said. Lily made a small sound that might have been relief or might have been something too complicated for a 5-year-old to have a name for yet. The 10 minutes passed. 11, 12. She had her hand on the car door at 13 when the east loading bay door opened. Damien came out first. He was walking straight, which told her the conversation had not become physical, or if it had, he had won it cleanly. Behind him, 2 of his men. Behind them, Morelli and 1 of his men. And then, Vanessa. Her hands were... Savannah stared, trying to process it. Her hands were behind her back. She was being walked, not roughly, but walked. Damien came to the car and opened the door beside Savannah and looked in at the children, and for a moment he said nothing, just looked at them the way a man looks at something that has just become real. And Ethan stared back at him with those eyes, the same eyes, the genetic mirror that had cracked the world open 48 hours ago on a rain-soaked street in Maine. "You okay?" Damien said to him. Ethan considered this question with the gravity it deserved. "The floor was cold," he said. Something moved through Damien's face. "We'll fix that," he said. He straightened and looked at Savannah over the roof of the car, and she looked back, and the night between them was cold and salt-sharp and carrying everything they hadn't finished saying. "Morelli's people are standing down," he said. "He made a deal. Information on 3 of his competitors in exchange for walking away clean." His voice was controlled, but something underneath it was not. "Vanessa is coming with us." "What does that mean?" "It means she answers for what she did." He held her gaze. "Not to him, not to anyone else, to you." A pause. "She's your sister. The judgment belongs to you." Savannah looked past him to where Vanessa was standing beside the building in the orange sodium light, her cream coat and her perfect hair and her expression that was finally not composed. That was finally, after everything, showing something that looked like what it actually was. A woman standing in the ruins of a plan that had cost more than she'd calculated, looking at her sister across a dark parking lot. The drive back to Harrow's Cove took 3 hours and 11 minutes. Savannah knew the exact time because she watched every minute of it on the dashboard clock. The twins pressed against her on either side, both of them asleep before they cleared the Boston city limits. Ethan went first, the way he always went, sudden and complete. One moment upright, and the next folded sideways against her arm, with his mouth slightly open, and his brow smoothed out by sleep into something that looked younger than 5, younger than anything that had happened in the last 8 hours. Lily went second, slower, fighting it the way she always fought sleep, her eyes blinking heavy and slower until they stopped. Savannah sat between them in the dark and did not sleep. In the front seat, Damien rode in silence. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the warehouse. She hadn't pushed it. The gray-bearded man, whose name she'd learned was Carr, drove with the patient competence of someone used to long drives in the dark. The second car followed them, carrying Vanessa, carrying the weight of what came next. She watched the highway and thought about nothing in particular, which was a skill she had developed in the first year after she'd left New York, and which meant, in practice, that she was thinking about everything at once but not letting any single thought get loud enough to require a response. She thought about Ethan's scrape palm, which she'd cleaned with the first aid kit Carr had produced from the glove compartment. She thought about Lily saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama," in the warehouse corridor. She thought about Damien's face when he'd looked at the children through the open car door. The particular expression on it, the stripped-down, unguarded thing that she had never seen on him before, not once in 5 years together, and that she understood instinctively had cost him something to show. She thought about what judgment belonged to her meant, and what she was going to do with it. They reached Harrow's Cove at 7:20. The inn first. She waited in the car with the sleeping children while Damien went inside briefly and came back. Then her cottage, which was dark and cold inside from being locked up since morning, and she carried Lily in from the car while Damien, without being asked, without making it a thing, carried Ethan. She watched him do it from the corner of her eye, the careful way he picked her son up, one hand supporting the head, moving slowly so as not to wake him. The concentration on his face. She got Lily into bed. She came back out to find Damien standing in the doorway of the second small bedroom, looking at Ethan asleep in the narrow bed under his lighthouse keeper duvet, and she stood in the hallway and watched him look and said nothing. He came out after a minute, pulling the door most of the way closed. They stood in the hallway. The cottage was quiet. The ocean was audible, just barely. A low push and pull against the rocks below the cliffs, the sound that had been her white noise for 5 years, the sound she associated with safety. "You're good with them," she said. He looked at her. "I was terrified," he said. "You didn't show it." "I showed it when I looked at him in the warehouse door. You saw it." "Yes," she said. "I did." They moved to the kitchen. She put the kettle on because she needed to do something with her hands, because the night required a transition, and this was the only one she had available to her. She stood at the counter and waited for it to boil, and he sat at the kitchen table. Her small, second-hand table with the uneven leg that she'd shimmed with a folded piece of cardboard, and neither of them spoke for a moment. "Morelli," she said, "is handled." "What does handled mean?" "It means he has more to lose from continuing than from stopping." His voice was even. "The information he gave me tonight, the 3 competitors, it removes his strategic advantage in the northeastern market entirely. He'll spend the next 2 years managing that fallout. He doesn't have the resources to come after me simultaneously." He paused. "He's done." "And his people at the warehouse. Carr managed it." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push because there were doors she had decided years ago not to open, and that was still true. "Vanessa," she said. He was quiet for a moment. The kettle was beginning to make its pre-boiling sound. "She's at the inn," he said. "Carr's people are with her. She's not being held against her will. She can leave whenever she wants, but she hasn't tried to leave." Another pause. "I think she's waiting for you." Savannah made the tea. She made 2 cups without asking because some habits survived everything, and she brought them to the table and sat down across from him and wrapped both hands around her mug. "How did she get the school to release them?" she said. The question had been sitting in her chest since the warehouse, waiting. "She's on their emergency contact form," Damien said. "Under your real name, as your sister. You put it there when you enrolled them." She stared at the table. "I put it there," she said. "You couldn't have known." "I put her on the form because she was the only family I had left, and even after everything I couldn't—" She stopped, pressed her mouth closed for a moment. "I couldn't make myself erase her entirely." He looked at her. He didn't say anything. "She knew that," Savannah said. "She knew I wouldn't be able to erase her entirely because she knows me. She's known me my whole life." She looked down at her tea. "That's the part I can't get past. Not the planning, not the Morelli piece. Those things are evil in a way that's clean, in a way I can understand and name and put somewhere. What I can't get past is that she knew I'd leave a door open, and she used it." She paused. "She used it to get to my children." The cottage was very quiet. "What are you going to do?" he said. She thought about it honestly, the way she'd been thinking about it since the parking lot. Not the easy answer, not the clean answer, but the true one. "I'm going to go see her," she said. "Tonight, before I lose the nerve. I'll come with you." "No." She met his eyes. "This is between me and her. You said the judgment was mine. That means I do it alone." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. She finished her tea. She called Carr and told him she was coming to the inn. She checked on the twins, both still asleep, undisturbed, Lily with one arm thrown over the edge of the bed in the way she always slept, Ethan with his face pressed sideways into the pillow. She looked at them for a minute. Just a minute. Then she put her jacket on and walked to the Meridian Inn. Vanessa was in one of the small sitting rooms off the main corridor. Not the lobby, somewhere more private, with a lamp and 2 chairs and a window that showed nothing but dark. She was sitting in one of the chairs with her coat finally off, folded over the arm beside her. Without it, she looked smaller. She looked tired in a way the coat had been covering. She looked, for the first time in Savannah's recent memory, exactly her age. Savannah sat in the chair across from her. Carr had stationed himself in the hallway. She told him to stay outside, and he had. They looked at each other. "The children are home," Savannah said. "They're safe." Vanessa exhaled. Something left her body with it. Some tension she'd been holding, and the fact that it was there, the fact that she was genuinely relieved, made Savannah feel something complicated and painful that she hadn't anticipated feeling. "I need you to explain it to me," Savannah said. "Not defend it. Explain it. From the beginning, all of it, in whatever words are actually true, without the version you would have me believe." Vanessa looked at her hands for a moment. They were folded in her lap, which was a Vanessa posture Savannah recognized from childhood. She held herself like that when she was about to say something difficult. She had been doing it since they were girls. "I was in love with him," Vanessa said. No preamble, no softening. "I know how that sounds. I know what it makes me. I'm not trying to make it sound like anything other than what it is." She looked up. "I was in love with him for 2 years before you left. The entire last 2 years you were with him, I was managing it. I was managing something that had no acceptable outlet because he was yours and you were my sister, and there was no version of what I felt that was permissible. So you decided to remove me," Savannah said. "I decided to give him a reason to end it," Vanessa said. "That was the original plan. I thought if you came home and saw what you saw, you would end it yourself. I thought it would hurt you, and I told myself it would hurt you less than years more of being with a man who I believed was going to eventually put you in danger. I told myself I was protecting you." She stopped. "I was lying to myself. I wanted him. I wanted him, and I wanted the version of my life where I was the one he chose. And I built a story around that, want to make it look like something better than it was." Savannah sat with that. The gas fireplace in the corner made its small sound. "And when it didn't work," she said, "when he rejected you, and when I was gone, I fell apart," Vanessa said flatly. "That's the honest word for it. I had done something that could not be undone and gotten nothing from it. Not him, not even the satisfaction of having protected you because you had vanished and I didn't know if you were safe. I spent the first year terrified you were dead." Her voice had gone dry and steady, the voice of someone who has rehearsed a confession but is delivering it anyway because the moment requires it. "I hired someone to look for you. It took almost 2 years to find any trace. When they found the cafe, when I knew you were alive and you had children and you had built a life." She stopped. "I should have left it alone. But you didn't. I didn't." She looked at her hands again. "Morelli found me. I don't know how much of it was him finding me or me being findable because I was asking questions about Damien's current operations, trying to determine whether he was going to come looking for you. Morelli had been watching Damien for years. He knew about me, knew what I'd done, knew it gave him something to work with." She paused. "He told me that if Damien found you and the children, he would take them, that he would use every resource he had to get custody, and that you, as Claire Mercer, as a woman without legal existence, would have no recourse." But you believed him. I wanted to believe him. The honesty in it was its own kind of brutal. It gave me a reason to act. It gave me a reason to be the one standing between you and him again, to be the one protecting you again, to be necessary in your life again. Her voice was very even. "I have spent 5 years carrying what I did to you. I have carried it every day. And I am not a good person, Savannah. I know that. I have known it with increasing clarity for 5 years. But the one thing I told myself was that I had protected you, that the outcome of what I did was that you were safe and away from his world. And taking that away, understanding that I had also taken your family away, that those children had grown up without their father because of me, I couldn't hold all of that at once. So I made Morelli's story true because it was easier than mine. Savannah looked at her sister, at the familiar face worn down to something she hadn't seen before. Not the composed version, not the managed version, just a woman in a sitting room at night who had run out of stories to tell. "I'm not going to forgive you tonight," Savannah said. "I want you to understand that. I don't know if I'm going to forgive you at all. And I'm not going to make you a promise I don't know if I can keep." Vanessa nodded once. "But I need to ask you something," Savannah said, "and I need you to tell me the truth, not the version that makes you look better." "Okay. Do you actually believe he's dangerous to them? To the children? Not the story you built to justify what you did. The truth underneath it. Do you believe, knowing what you know about who he is, that Damian Blackwood is a danger to his own children?" Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. "No," she said. "I don't believe that." Her voice was very quiet. "I believe he would pull the world apart to keep them safe. I believe I knew that when I watched him in those 2 years, and I used it against him without ever acknowledging what it was." She looked at Savannah directly. "He loved you. I watched him love you for 2 years, and I couldn't stand it, not because I thought he was wrong for you, but because I wanted it for myself." The sitting room was very quiet. "You need to leave Harrow's Cove," Savannah said. "Tomorrow. And you need to stay out of my life and my children's lives until I tell you otherwise. Not forever. I'm not willing to say forever because they deserve to know their family, and so do I, and so do you. But until I tell you otherwise." "Yes," Vanessa said, "and when I'm ready to have that conversation, the one where we try to figure out what's salvageable, it will be on my terms, my timeline. Yes, and you will never, under any circumstances, make a decision about my children's lives without my knowledge and consent again." Her voice stayed flat and even through all of it, which was costing her more than she showed. "Are we clear?" "We're clear," Vanessa said. Her voice had gone very small. Savannah stood up. She looked at her sister for a long moment, at the exhaustion and the grief, and the thing that was not repentance exactly, but was perhaps the material that repentance got built from, in people for whom it didn't come easily. "I'm glad you're alive," she said. "I was always glad you were alive, even when I was most angry at you. I want you to know that." She paused. "Go home, Vanessa." She walked out. She walked back to the cottage through the dark, and the ocean was very present in the night air, and she breathed it in with the specific, deliberate attention of someone returning to a place after a long absence, even though she'd been here this morning, even though she'd been here every morning for almost 5 years. Something had changed in the air of it. Something had shifted in the way it felt to be standing on this particular piece of coastline. Damian was in the kitchen. He'd washed the mugs and was standing at the window looking at the dark outside it with his hands in his pockets. He turned when she came in. She looked at him for a moment from the doorway. "She's leaving tomorrow," Savannah said. "She told me everything, the honest version." "Are you okay?" "No." She said it simply, without drama. "But I will be." She came into the kitchen and sat at the table and looked at her hands. She confirmed what the transcript showed, and she confirmed that the custody concern was Morelli's story, that she doesn't actually believe you would harm them. He came to the table and sat down, not across from her, beside her, which was not where he'd sat before, and she noticed it without remarking on it. "I have to ask you something," she said. "Okay. The criminal organization, the empire." She looked at him. "I'm not asking you to walk away from it tonight, or to make promises you can't keep, but I need to know, when you look at Ethan and Lily, when you actually think about what being their father means, what do you see? For them. 5 years from now. 10. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she didn't interrupt it, because she could see him actually sitting with the question instead of reaching for an answer. "I see a different kind of operation," he said finally. "I've been moving toward it for 3 years anyway. The legitimate side has been growing, the acquisitions, the real estate, the logistics. It's slower, less profitable in the short term." He paused. "I see a man who does not bring certain things home, who does not have certain conversations in front of them, who makes sure that his name, when they hear it, means something they can stand behind." He looked at her. "I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I become a different person. I'm not going to be a man who coaches Little League and bakes things. That's not what I am, and we both know it. I know, but I can be a man who is there, who shows up, who doesn't make them carry the weight of what he is. He held her eyes. I know that's not a complete sentence either. I know there's more to work out than a conversation at a kitchen table at midnight, but I need you to know that I understand what's being asked. She looked at him for a long time. You said you never stopped looking for me, she said. 8 months. Tell me about it. He looked slightly surprised. Then he told her. He told her plainly, without self-pity, in the flat, factual way he described things he hadn't processed into a story yet. The investigators, the dead ends, the single phone call she'd hung up from, the moment when he'd made the decision to stop because continuing felt like trespass. He told her about the year after, which he described in 4 sentences that had the compression of something much larger behind them. He told her about Vanessa's visit and what he'd understood from it, and how he'd sat with the transcripts for 4 years, knowing they proved a truth he had no way of delivering. She listened to all of it. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. We lost 5 years, she said. Yes. We can't get them back. No. Ethan and Lily can't get them back either. I know. His voice was rough at the edges. I'm angry about that, she said. I'm going to be angry about that for a long time. I want you to understand that I'm not pretending I'm not angry. I'm not performing forgiveness because the crisis is over and it seems like the next thing to do. I am genuinely furious about 5 years and everything in them, and that fury doesn't have a single clean target, and that makes it worse. She paused. Some of it is for you, for the night you told me to disappear, for the choice you made with the wrong information, but still made. I know, he said. I need you to let me be angry about it, not to manage it or explain it away. Just let it be a real thing that lives in this for a while. Yes, he said. No deflection, no argument. She nodded. Okay, she said. Okay. She looked at the window above the sink, at the black rectangle of it, the Maine night outside, the invisible ocean making its patient sound. The children are going to have questions tomorrow, she said, when they wake up. I know. Ethan especially. He thinks about things longer than he lets on. He'll have been processing this since the warehouse. She paused. He noticed you at the window in the rain. He filed you somewhere. What do I tell them? The question was genuine, not rhetorical, not performed. A man with an enormous and complicated empire asking her what to say to 2 5-year-olds in the morning, with the same seriousness he'd applied to every other problem of his life. Something in her chest moved. The truth, she said, in 5-year-old language, but the truth, that you're their father, that you didn't know where they were for a long time, that you found them. She paused. Let Ethan ask his questions. He'll ask a lot of them. Answer honestly or tell him you'll tell him when he's older, but don't make things up. She looked at him. And Lily will want to know if you're staying. That will be her question. It might not come out as a question. She might just draw it. But that's what she'll want to know. What do I tell her? Tell her yes. She met his eyes. If it's true. He held her gaze. It's true, he said. The night moved past midnight. She made more tea that neither of them drank much of. They talked. Not about the past, not about the future, but about the children specifically, practically. What Ethan ate and wouldn't eat, the boat obsession, the way he slept with one leg out from under the covers regardless of temperature. Lily's sea glass collection, currently housed in 4 mason jars on the windowsill. The lighthouse keeper story, and why it had to be told exactly the same way every night, or it didn't count. The way they were different, and the way they were startlingly similar. How Lily had Savannah's stubbornness, and Ethan had something else. Something she'd recognized from the beginning and never had language for until she'd watched Damien hold himself still at the edge of a crisis. He listened to all of it with the focused attention of a man taking inventory of something precious. At some point past 2 in the morning, she said, You should sleep. There's a room at the inn. I know. Neither of them moved. Stay, she said. Not with anything in it except tiredness and the particular honesty that comes at 2 in the morning when there's nothing left to perform. There's a couch. It folds out. I'm not saying anything except that I don't want you to be a mile up the coast right now. He looked at her. Okay, he said. She got the spare blanket from the hall closet. She set up the couch with the practical efficiency of someone who had done everything alone for 5 years and no longer expected help. He watched her do it, and she let him watch. And when it was done, she stood in the kitchen doorway and said goodnight and went to bed. She slept. For the first time in 2 days, genuinely, completely slept. In the morning, Ethan found him. She heard it from this kitchen where she was making coffee. Her son's footsteps on the floor, the particular pattern of a child moving through the house and stopping, and then silence, and then, "You're still here." A pause. Then Damien's voice, rough with sleep. "Yeah, I'm still here. Mom said you might be." She was right. Another pause. She stayed where she was. She poured the coffee. "Are you our dad?" Ethan asked. She held her breath. "Yes," Damien said. Simple, direct, no qualifier. The silence stretched out for several seconds. She imagined Ethan's face during it, the processing look, the small frown that appeared when he was running something through whatever machinery lived behind those dark eyes. "Okay," Ethan said finally, and then, "Do you know how to sail?" She heard Damien exhale, something unsteady in it, something that had been held too long. "Not well, but I can learn. I'm going to learn before I'm 6. You could learn with me." "Yeah," Damien said, and his voice had gone rough in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I could do that." Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, sea glass hair and her mother's eyes. She looked at Savannah. Savannah looked back. "He's staying?" Lily said. "He's staying." Lily considered this with the gravity of a child making an assessment that mattered. Then she climbed onto the kitchen chair and reached for the cereal box. And that was that. The question answered, filed, accepted with the practical completeness that children brought to the things they'd already decided they wanted. The months that followed were not clean. Nothing was clean. The anger Savannah had promised herself she would not suppress surfaced at inconvenient moments. In the middle of conversations that had nothing to do with it, at 2 in the morning when the house was quiet and the math of the lost years insisted on being done. Damien made mistakes, not large ones but real ones. The instinct to solve problems without consultation. The door he would sometimes close that she would have to ask him to open. The moments when the weight of what he was sat visibly on him, and she had to decide whether to ask about it or let it sit. She asked. "Usually." He answered. "Usually." The twins adjusted with the terrifying adaptability of small children given enough stability and honesty. Ethan's questions came steadily, on his own timeline, some of them easy, some of them not. Damien answered them all with the same plain directness he'd used the first morning, and she watched her son absorb this and make something of it in the quiet place where he processed things. Lily drew a new picture. 4 figures outside the cottage on the cliff, the ocean below. But this time the tall, dark figure was not at the edge. He was in the middle of the group, one hand reaching down toward the smaller figures. She put it on the refrigerator. Vanessa did not contact them for 7 months. When she did, it was a letter, handwritten, which was a choice Savannah recognized as deliberate, the most vulnerable possible format. It was not an apology in the conventional sense. It was an accounting, a factual, clear-eyed inventory of what she had done and what it had cost, with nothing in it that asked for anything in return. She had entered a program, the letter said. She was working with someone. She was not asking to be forgiven. She was asking, if and when Savannah was ready, for the chance to know her niece and nephew. Savannah read the letter twice. She put it in the drawer of the bedside table and did not respond for 3 weeks. When she did respond, it was brief, not warm, not cold. The door was open. Narrow, but open. The wedding was not large. They did not want large. They wanted the Hudson River at evening, a handful of people who mattered, the children in clothes they immediately complained about, and then forgot to complain about because there was a cake involved. Ethan asked if he had to wear the tie the whole time. Damien told him he had to wear it until after the photographs. Ethan asked how long photographs took. Damien said longer than anyone wanted them to. Ethan accepted this with the stoic practicality of someone who had inherited a significant capacity for endurance. Lily held Savannah's hand during the ceremony with a grip that did not loosen. 1 year after the warehouse, after the rain-soaked street, after everything. They went back to Maine. A weekend in October, the same gray skies, the same cold edge in the air that meant the summer was over and the coast was returning to itself. They stayed at the Meridian Inn, which Damien no longer owned the property near. He had pulled out of the acquisition in the end, a decision he had made without being asked. On the second morning, they walked the cliffs. The ocean was loud and honest below them, doing what water did, indifferent and present. Ethan and Lily were ahead, always pulling the distance open, the way children moved through the world like it couldn't end anywhere unexpected. Ethan was explaining something to his sister in the serious tone he used for theories. Lily was half listening and half looking at the ground for sea glass. Damien walked beside Savannah. Their hands were not touching. Then they were, without either of them deciding it. "You never told me," she said, "why you pulled out of the Coast Road property." He was quiet for a moment. "Because it wasn't mine to buy," he said. "This place belonged to you. I wasn't going to move into the edges of it whether you wanted me there or not." He looked at the water. "I moved into it because you asked me to, not because I decided to." She looked at him, at the profile of him against the gray Atlantic, the jaw and the eyes and the hardness that was still there, that had not gone, that would not go, that she had stopped expecting to go and had instead learned to read the way you learned to read weather. Not dangerous, not to her, just the shape of him. "The years we lost," she said. "Yeah. I stopped counting them." She looked at the horizon. "Not forgetting, just stopped running the arithmetic." He looked at her. "Me too," he said. Ahead of them, Lily stopped walking. She had found something in the rocks at the cliff's edge. She crouched down with the focus of a child who has located a specific and important thing. Ethan doubled back to see, crouching beside her, both of them examining whatever it was with the total absorption that children brought to the world when the world delivered something worth looking at. "Mom!" Lily's voice carried back on the cold air. "Come look! It's blue this time!" Savannah let go of Damien's hand. She moved toward her children, toward the sound of Lily's voice and the gray cliff's edge and the enormous indifferent ocean that had watched her run and hide and build and lose and fight and find her way back. Damien walked beside her, slightly behind, not crowding it, understanding, as he had learned to understand, which moments were hers to lead. She crouched beside her daughter. In Lily's palm was a piece of sea glass, worn smooth, edges dissolved by years of water and stone, opaque and perfect. Not the common green or brown. Blue. Rare blue, the color of deep water when the light hit it right. "I knew I'd find one," Lily said. Her voice was matter of fact, the voice of someone whose patience had been vindicated. "You did," Savannah said. Lily turned it in her fingers. The light moved through it. "Can we keep it?" "Yes," Savannah said, "we keep it." She looked up at Damien standing above them. He was looking at his daughter's face. The thing in his expression was not the unguarded devastation of the warehouse, or the controlled hardness of the corridor, or the raw grief of 5 years measured in a kitchen at midnight. It was something quieter and more permanent than any of those things. Something that had moved past the stage of being felt and had become simply the way things were. She looked back at the sea glass in her daughter's hand. The years they had lost were real, and the cost of them was real. And the love that had been pulled apart and rebuilt into something rougher and more honest than what it had started as was real. And none of it was clean, none of it was easy, and no version of the story made the math come out even. But the future was still theirs. The children's voices lifted in the cold October air. The ocean kept its indifferent rhythm. And on the cliffs above Harrow's Cove, with a piece of rare blue glass in a small hand and 5 people who had found their way to the same piece of coastline through every kind of damage a life could produce, the story settled into something that didn't need a next chapter. It just needed to be lived.